I want to tell you about this while I can still remember the order in which things happened. Not because I'm losing my memory, because the order is starting to feel less like a sequence and more like something I was handed, and I need to set it down now, in my own words, before the version that makes sense takes over. We moved to Harrowwick in October because my mother got a position managing the new clinic annex on Route 11. She'd been commuting 90 minutes each way from our apartment in Harford County for 3 months. Finally, the landlord in Harrowwick found us a rental, a squat 2-story with vinyl siding the colour of old teeth, 2 blocks from the middle of town. I was 15, sophomore year. I'd already done the new kid thing twice before. I wasn't afraid of it. I just didn't expect what there was to be afraid of. Harrowwick is in a valley. You drive in on a 2-lane state road that drops between ridges thick with oak and tulip poplar, and the town appears all at once. A grid of about 8 streets, a post office, a Family Dollar, a diner called Keller's with a rotating pie case, and the school, Harrowwick Regional Secondary, grades 7 through 12 in one long brick building set into a hillside, so the back exits of the upper floor open directly onto the slope. The football field is on top of the hill. You can see it from most of the town, this rectangle of green up against the sky. I started on a Wednesday. My mother dropped me off at 7:40 and I stood on the front steps with a schedule printout and a backpack that still had a luggage tag from the last move. The building smelled like every school building everywhere. Floor wax, cafeteria steam, old paper. I found the main office and a woman named Mrs. Carvel checked me in. She was efficient and pleasant. She gave me a hallway map, a locker combination, and a single laminated card, pale blue, about the size of a playing card. "That's your rule card," she said. "Keep it with you." I looked at it. Printed in small, clean font were 6 rules. I read them standing right there at the counter. 1. When the long bell rings, go to the nearest interior room and sit facing the door. 2. If a classmate's seat is empty, do not say their name until they return. 3. Do not open the door to any room you hear a lesson being taught in if you are not assigned to that class. 4. During a hall transition, walk only in the direction of increasing room numbers. 5. If you are asked, "Are you in the right place?" by anyone you do not recognize, say yes. 6. Never go above the 2nd floor, between 3:15 and 6 p.m. I read them twice. Mrs. Carvel was watching me, not anxiously, just watching. The way you watch someone take a first bite of something you cooked. "Some of these are a little unusual," I said. "You'll get used to them faster than you think. What's the long bell? You'll know it when you hear it. It's different from the class bell. What's on the 3rd floor after 3:15? She smiled. Storage and maintenance access. Off limits for safety reasons. The rule just formalizes it. I put the card in my pocket. I didn't think about it again for almost 6 hours. That was my first mistake. Not that I should have thought about it, but that I assumed not thinking about it was neutral. In Harrowwick, not thinking about the rules is different from not following them. You can follow them unconsciously. That's expected. But if you stop thinking about them, you start asking questions, and questions are where the trouble begins. My first class was American History with Mr. Dunn, room 107. He was a tall man with a shaved head and reading glasses he wore on a lanyard, and he taught leaning against his desk with his arms crossed like he was waiting for someone to challenge him. He nodded at me when I came in and pointed to an empty seat in the 3rd row. I sat down. The room was full. Maybe 22 kids. They were quiet in a way I didn't clock immediately. Not silent. They talked. They passed notes. One kid in the back was drawing on his hand with a ballpoint. But there was a quality to the noise that I can only describe as rehearsed, like the volume and type of chatter had been agreed on in advance. It was exactly the amount of sound you'd expect in a classroom, no more. I introduced myself when Mr. Dunn asked me to. Caleb Morrow has just moved from Maryland. A few nods. A girl in the front row turned around and looked at me with an expression I mistook for curiosity. I'd later learn her name was Wren Taggart, and that expression was not curiosity. It was a measurement. The period passed normally. The class bell rang. A short, sharp tone, and everyone stood and moved into the hallway. I checked my schedule. Room 112 English. I turned left. A kid I didn't know caught my arm, gently but firm. Room numbers go up that way, he said, pointing right. My class is back there, though. 112. Yeah, but you're at 107. You go up to the end of the hall, take the stairs, cross on the second floor, and come back down. Room numbers only go one direction per floor. I stared at him. That's a 10-minute walk for a room that's 30 feet away. He shrugged. You'll make it. The transition time here is 12 minutes. I wanted to ask why. The word was right there on my tongue, but something in his face, not fear, not warning, something more like practiced patience, stopped me. I went the long way around. I made it to English with 2 minutes to spare. The hallways, I noticed, were one-directional. Every student moved the same way. No one passed anyone going the opposite direction. It was like a circulatory system. The building had a current, and everyone was a blood cell. I watched it from the stairwell landing and felt the first real prickle of something I couldn't name. Not fear. Something more like the feeling you get when you realize a crowd is doing something coordinated and you don't know who's conducting. By the end of the first day, I'd absorbed the surface rhythm. The class bells were normal. Transitions flowed in one direction. Teachers taught well. Nothing strange about the content, the textbooks, the assignments. The cafeteria served recognizable food. Kids talked about normal things, a TV show, a girl someone liked, and a test next week. But every so often, someone would adjust their behavior in a small, precise way that didn't match any social logic I understood. In the cafeteria, I sat across from a kid named Derek Sills. He was eating a sandwich and telling me about the basketball team when a girl 3 tables away stood up, carried her tray to the return window, and left through the east doors. Derek stopped talking, not because she'd interrupted him. He stopped, watched the doors until they closed, and then picked up his sentence exactly where he'd left off, mid-word, as if he'd pressed pause on himself. "What was that?" I said. "What was what?" "You stopped talking." "Did I?" He looked genuinely puzzled. Then he shrugged. "Lost my train of thought. Anyway, the point guard graduated, so..." He hadn't lost his train of thought. He'd resumed it with mechanical precision. I let it go. After the last bell at 3:10, I walked towards the front entrance and past the main stairwell. A few students were heading up toward the 3rd floor, backpacks on. I checked the time on my phone, 3:11. 4 minutes before the cut-off. They moved quickly with purpose, and I heard a door close above me. By 3:14, the stairwell was empty. By 3:15, a custodian, a broad man in grey coveralls whose name tag said Loomis, walked to the base of the stairs and stood there, not blocking them, just standing. He nodded at me as I passed. I walked home. The air smelled like wood smoke and wet leaves. I sat on the porch of our rented house and looked at the rule card. I read Rule 6 again. Never go above the second floor between 3:15 and 6 p.m. The students I'd seen had gone up before 3:15. They were already there. The rule didn't say you couldn't be up there. It said you couldn't go up there. I put the card back in my pocket and went inside to do homework. My mother came home at 6:30, microwaved leftover pasta, and asked how my first day was. "Fine," I said. "Kids seem nice?" "Yeah, normal." I don't know why I didn't mention the rules. Maybe because they seemed too strange to describe without sounding like I was making fun of the school, and my mother was already stressed about the move. Maybe because I hadn't decided yet whether they were strange at all. A lot of schools have odd traditions, hall monitors, dress codes, honor systems. This was just more specific. I went to bed that night and lay in the dark listening to a sound I couldn't identify. A low, a rhythmic hum that I thought was the furnace until I realized it was coming from outside, from up the hill, from the direction of the school. It wasn't loud, it wasn't alarming. It sounded like a building breathing in its sleep. The first week passed. I followed the rules. Not because I believed in them, because I didn't have a reason not to. They were inconvenient, but not oppressive. The one-directional hallway traffic added 4 or 5 minutes to my transitions, but the 12-minute window absorbed it. I never heard the long bell. I never had to test Rule 5. And Rule 2, if a classmate's seat is empty, do not say their name until they return, hadn't come up because no one had been absent. On Thursday that changed. In Mr. Dunn's class, I arrived to find one seat empty. Second row near the window. The kid who usually sat there was named Hollis Pratt. A skinny, red-haired boy who never spoke in class but always had his homework done. I knew his name because Mr. Dunn had called on him twice the day before. But when I looked at the empty seat, something strange happened in the room. Nobody looked at it. Not in the way people don't look at something they haven't noticed. In the way people don't look at something they've agreed not to see. Mr. Dunn took attendance. He read every name on the list. He did not read Hollis Pratt's name. He moved from Paletto to Reeves without pause. I raised my hand. I don't know why. Some reflex, maybe just the new kid's need to prove he's paying attention. "Mr. Dunn, you skipped." "I didn't skip anyone, Caleb." "No, there's a kid who sits there. The room changed. I don't mean the temperature dropped or the lights flickered. I mean the quality of the silence changed. 22 kids were looking at me, not with hostility, with something worse, recognition. They knew what I was about to do. They'd seen it before, and they were waiting to see if I'd finish. The girl in the front row, Wren, turned around in her seat. She looked at me the way you'd look at someone leaning over a railing. "He means nobody's absent, Mr. Dunn," she said. "Right, Caleb?" I closed my mouth. Something in her voice, not threatening, not even tense, just certain, made me nod. "Right. Sorry. Miscounted." Mr. Dunn nodded and continued. The silence dissolved back into the rehearsed hum. Wren turned around, but she dropped her left hand behind her chair back, where only I could see, and held up 2 fingers. Then she folded them down, one at a time, a countdown. At the end of class, she was waiting for me in the hallway. "Walk with me," she said. "Same direction. Keep pace." We walked. She was shorter than me, with dark hair cut blunt at her jaw. and a way of holding the backpack straps that made her look like she was bracing for something. "You almost said his name," she said. "Hollis Pratt. Why can't I?" "You can, right now. He's not in a classroom and there's no empty seat you're looking at. The rule is specific. Seat empty, name unsaid. That's the boundary." "Why?" She didn't answer immediately. We turned the corner, went up the stairs, and crossed the second-floor corridor. Below us, through the interior windows, I could see the main hall flowing with students, all moving in one direction, like fish in a current. "How much do you want to know?" she asked. "Enough to stop almost getting myself in trouble." "Then don't say absent students' names during class. Don't open doors to classes you're not assigned to. Follow the direction of the room numbers, and when you hear the long bell..." She stopped walking. "You haven't heard it yet?" "No." "You will. It sounds like the class bell, but it doesn't stop. It holds. When it does, you get inside the nearest interior room, no windows, and you sit facing the door. You don't close your eyes. You don't leave until the bell stops. What happens if... The rules don't come with what happens if. That's the point. You follow the M, and you don't find out." "That's not an answer." "No," she said, "it's not." She peeled off toward room 214 and didn't look back. I stood on the landing and watched her go. She walked exactly the right direction. She didn't hurry. She didn't look around. She was, I realized, as calibrated to this building as a thermostat. And she'd been here long enough that the calibration was invisible even to herself. I looked up Hollis Pratt that night, searched his name on my phone. Nothing. No social media, no school directory listing, no sports roster. I tried the school's website. A basic template with a calendar and a staff list. No student directory at all. I texted Derek Sills, whose number I'd gotten on day 2. "Hey, is Hollis Pratt sick?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Don't know a Hollis." I started to type. "He sits in the second row in Dunn's class," and then stopped. Derek was in that class. He sat 4 seats from Hollis. He'd seen him every day for weeks. And he'd just told me he didn't know him. I put my phone down. I picked up the rule card and read Rule 2 again. If a classmate's seat is empty, do not say their name until they return. Until they return. Not unless. Not if. Until. The rule assumed they'd come back, which meant this had happened before, which meant the rule existed because people had said the name and something had happened when they did, and it also meant that Hollis, whoever and wherever he was expected to reappear. He did. On Monday. He was in his seat when I walked into the first period. Same red hair, same quiet posture, same completed homework on his desk. Mr. Dunn called his name during attendance. "Pratt, here." No one reacted. No one welcomed him back. No one seemed to register that he'd been gone at all. At the end of class, I caught up with him in the hall. I'm not sure what I intended to ask. "Where were you?" seemed too direct. "Are you okay?" seemed presumptuous. I just fell into step beside him. "Hey, Caleb, I'm new." "I know," he said. His voice was flat. Not unfriendly. Flat. "You were out last week." "Was I?" He looked at me. His eyes were the same colour as his hair, a pale amber, and they didn't settle on me exactly. They settled on a point about 2 inches behind my head. "I don't think so." "Your seat was empty on Thursday." "I don't remember Thursday being any different." He smiled. It was a real smile. It reached his eyes. And it was the most disturbing thing I'd seen since arriving in Harrowick, because it was completely genuine. He wasn't lying. He wasn't covering. He simply did not have Thursday. I found Wren at lunch. She was eating alone in the corner of the cafeteria, which I would learn was not antisocial behaviour but strategic positioning. She sat where she could see both exits and the interior hallway door. "Hollis is back," I said, sitting across from her. "I know. He doesn't remember being gone. They never do. How many times has this happened?" She put down her fork. "Since I've been here. 4 students. All came back within a week. None of them remembers the gap. The rest of the school forgets they were ever absent. If you ask anyone, teachers, students, office staff, they'll say the attendance was normal. But you remember." "Yes. Why you and not them?" She looked at me for a long time. "Because I broke Rule 3 in 8th grade. I opened a door I wasn't assigned to." I waited. She picked up her fork again, turned it over and set it down. "Room 209, I heard a lesson. A voice teaching something very clearly through the door. I thought I'd gotten my schedule wrong. I opened the door. The room was empty. Desks, chairs, whiteboard, everything. But no one inside. The voice was still going. It was coming from the walls, or the floor, or I don't know. It was reciting something, a list. I stood there for maybe 5 seconds, then I closed the door and walked away. What was it reciting? Names. It was reciting names, and one of them was mine. She said it without drama, like she was describing a traffic pattern. After that, the rules stopped being invisible to me. Everyone else follows them the way you follow grammar, automatically without thinking about the structure. But I see the structure now. I see when someone disappears. I see when they come back. I see the gap. And I can't unsee it. And you think opening that door did this to you? I think Rule 3 exists because whatever is in those rooms, whatever teaches those empty lessons, when you open that door, it sees you back. And once it has, you're not inside the system the same way anymore. You're adjacent to it. You can see the seams. I sat with that. The cafeteria hummed around us. Normal sounds, trays, voices, the squeak of sneakers on linoleum. "What do you think happens to the students who disappear?" I asked. "I don't think they go anywhere. I think they stop being present, like a signal dropping out, and then it comes back. But there's a gap in them when it does. A day, 2 days. Gone. And the rule about not saying their name, I think the name is how it knows you've noticed. If a student is gone and you say their name aloud in the space where they should be, that empty seat, you're announcing to whatever runs this that you can see the absence, and then it sees you. Like what happened to you with the door. Exactly like what happened to me with the door." We were quiet for a minute. Then I asked the only question that mattered to me in that moment, the one that had been building since my first morning. "Is anyone trying to stop this? Teachers, parents, anyone?" Wren shook her head. Not sadly. Practically. "The teachers follow the rules too. I don't think most of them even know they're doing it. And the parents. Caleb. Most of these kids' parents went to this school. They carry the rules in their bones. They don't question them because they never learned to question them. It's not a conspiracy. It's a culture, a deep one. The rules are just how things are here, the way gravity is. But you question them. I see them. That's not the same thing as questioning them. I follow every single rule. I follow them harder than anyone because I know what they cost. Questioning them would mean trying to break them, and I've seen what the edges of breakage look like. What do they look like? Like room 209 with no one in it and my name coming out of the walls. I should have left it there. Wren had given me a functional map. Follow the rules, don't name the absent, don't open wrong doors, and whatever you do, don't attract the attention of whatever system the school was running on. That was enough. I could have ridden it out. My mother's clinic contract was for 2 years. I could do 2 years of walking in one direction and keeping my mouth shut. But there was a problem, and the problem was that I liked Hollis Pratt. Not romantically, I just liked him. He was quiet and strange, and he drew these small, intricate patterns in the margins of his notes, geometric things, tessellations that seemed to shift when you looked at them from different angles. We had 3 classes together, and he was the only person in any of them who seemed genuinely unbothered by the rules, not because he'd internalized them, but because he appeared to operate on some frequency where they simply didn't register as unusual. He was like a cat in a house full of dogs. Same space, different experience of it. 2 weeks after his return, we were in the library during a free period. He was drawing. I was pretending to read a chapter on the reconstruction. I watched his pen move and realized the pattern he was making was familiar. "That looks like the hallway map," I said. He looked down. "Does it?" "Yeah. That's the first floor corridor, the one-way flow." He tilted the paper. "Huh. I guess it does." He kept drawing. The pattern extended. It wasn't just the first floor, it was all 3 floors, rendered as a kind of nested spiral. The traffic pattern of the entire building compressed into a single, continuous line. "Hollis, do you know you're drawing the school?" He stopped, looked at the paper, looked at me. "I draw what feels right," he said. "I don't plan them. Have you ever been to the 3rd floor, after 3:15? His pen hand twitched. It was small. A micro-movement. A flinch at the frequency of nerve endings. But I saw it. "I don't go to the 3rd floor," he said. His voice had changed. The flatness was gone. Something underneath it was audible now. Not fear, but a kind of pressure, like a voice speaking from under a weight. "Do you remember where you were last Thursday? The Thursday you missed?" "I didn't miss a Thursday." "You did. Your seat was empty. I almost said your name." He put his pen down. He looked at me, and for the first time his eyes focused directly on mine. Not 2 inches behind, but right on me, clear and sharp and very, very still. "If you almost said my name and you didn't, then someone stopped you. And if someone stopped you, you should listen to them and not to me." He picked up his pen and went back to drawing. The conversation was over, but the pattern on his paper had changed. The spiral was no longer a floor plan. It was something tighter, concentric rings collapsing towards a center point that he filled in with a single black dot. I looked at that dot and felt something I had not felt since arriving in Harrowick. Not unease. Not the prickle of wrongness I'd been cataloguing. Something older and simpler. I felt watched. The long bell rang on a Tuesday. I was in the 2nd floor hallway between classes, a 12-minute transition halfway through, walking in the direction of increasing room numbers. The normal class bell was a sharp electronic tone that lasted about 2 seconds. The long bell started the same way but didn't stop. It held. It held. And it held. And it changed. Not in pitch but in texture. as if the bell were being sustained not by a speaker but by a throat. The hallway reacted instantly. Every student within view turned and entered the nearest room. No hesitation, no confusion, no looking at each other for confirmation. They moved like water finding a drain. Smooth, fast, and utterly automatic. Doors opened and closed within seconds. The hallway was empty. I was standing between rooms 216 and 218. Room 216 had a window. I could see it through the door's narrow glass pane. Interior room. Rule 1 said nearest interior room. An interior room has no exterior windows. Room 216 didn't qualify. I pushed into 218. It was a storage closet. Cleaning supplies, a mop bucket and metal shelving. No windows. I sat on the floor facing the door and pulled it shut behind me. The long bell was audible through the walls. This sustained, humming, living tone that I could feel in my teeth. I sat there. The sound changed again. Underneath the bell, or maybe inside it, I heard movement. Not footsteps. Something more like displacement. The sound of air being pressed out of a space by something occupying it. It moved through the hallway outside my door, left to right, slow, measured. I could track it by the way the sound pressure shifted, a heaviness that moved like weather along the corridor. It stopped outside room 218. I was facing the door. The rule said to face the door. I understood now why. You were supposed to see. Not because seeing you is protected. Because looking away was worse. Because whatever was on the other side of that door could tell the difference between a person facing it and a person hiding from it. And the rule was built on the knowledge that facing it was the only posture it would pass. The door handle did not turn. The thing outside did not knock. But I felt it there the way you feel someone standing behind you in a dark room, not through any sense you can name, but through the sudden, total awareness that the air you are breathing has already been in someone else's lungs. The long bell stopped. I sat on the floor of that closet for another 3 minutes. Then the normal class bell rang. I heard doors open, heard students moving, heard the rehearsed hum of Harrowick Regional Secondary resume, as if nothing had happened. I went to my next class. My hands were shaking. No one looked at me. No one asked if I was okay. No one talked about the bell. The lesson started immediately. I looked at Wren across the room. She looked back. She gave me the smallest nod. Not reassurance, not sympathy. Acknowledgement. Now you know what the long bell is. That night I couldn't sleep. The hum from the hill was louder, or I was more attuned to it. I couldn't tell the difference. I lay in bed and ran through what I knew. The school had rules that everyone followed unconsciously. The rules governed movement, speech, and spatial access. Students occasionally vanished and returned with no memory of the gap. The building contained rooms where lessons were taught to no one. The long bell signalled the passage of something through the hallways that you survived by being still and visible behind a closed door. And all of this had been happening for at least as long as Wren had been a student. Likely much longer. I thought about my mother downstairs watching television, knowing none of this. I thought about calling her up and telling her everything. I thought about what she'd do. Probably call the school. Probably talk to Mrs. Carvel. Probably get a reasonable explanation involving fire drills and safety protocols, and the overactive imagination of a 15-year-old adjusting to a new town. And she'd be satisfied. and I'd go back to school the next day with the same rules and the same bell and the same thing in the hallway, because the system wasn't built on secrecy. It was built on normalcy. It had been normal for so long that the people inside it couldn't see its shape. The rules weren't hidden. They were printed on a laminated card and handed to you on your first day. The horror wasn't that no one knew. The horror was that everyone knew. And no one could hold the knowledge in a way that looked like knowing. Except Wren, and now maybe me. I found Wren before school the next morning. She was sitting on the front steps, reading a paperback with the cover torn off. "I need to understand what's on the third floor," I said. She closed the book. "Why?" "Because the rules point there. Everything flows toward it. The one-directional hallways spiral upward. The traffic pattern Hollis keeps drawing. It's a spiral that terminates on the third floor. The Long Bells thing moved from that direction. The third floor is the center of this. And Rule 6 keeps everyone away from it, during the hours when the building is almost empty. You're right. And the rule exists for a reason. I'm not saying we should break it. I'm saying I need to know what's up there. I can tell you what I know. I've never been up there after 3:15, but I've talked to people who have, 2 of them. Who? One graduated 4 years ago. He's fine. He works at Keller's Diner now. He went up there on a dare during his junior year. Stayed for about 10 minutes. He said the hallway was normal, but every classroom door was closed. And he could hear lessons going on inside all of them. Different voices, different subjects. He said the voices sounded like every teacher he'd ever had. And he said the air was warm, uncomfortably warm, like the building was metabolizing something. And the second person? Wren paused. The second person is Hollis. I felt something settle in my chest. No surprise. Recognition. The patterns on his paper. The gap in his memory. The way his eyes focused 2 inches behind my head, as if he was always looking at something just past the surface of the world. Hollis went to the 3rd floor. Hollis goes to the 3rd floor. I think he goes every time he disappears, and I don't think he decides to. I think it takes him. Takes him how? I don't know, that's the part I can't see. He's here, and then he's not, and then he's here again, and each time he comes back he's a little more aligned. His drawings get more precise. His silence gets deeper. He follows the rules more perfectly than anyone I've ever seen. And I think that's because he's not following them anymore. I think he's becoming them. We sat on the steps. The morning air was cold and sharp. Students were arriving. Cars pulling into the lot. Buses disgorging their loads. Everyone walked in the front door and turned right. Increasing room numbers. The current began. "I want to help him," I said. Wren looked at me. Her expression was the one I'd seen on my first day. That measuring look. But this time I understood what she was measuring. Not whether I was smart enough or brave enough. Whether I meant it. "Helping him means going where he goes," she said. "And I don't know if you can come back the same way he does. He comes back every time. He comes back less every time. That's not the same thing." I looked up the hill at the school. The 3rd floor windows caught the morning sun and gave back a flat, opaque glare, as if the glass had been replaced with something that only looked like glass. "Then we have to go before he disappears again," I said. "While he's still here, while he's still mostly Hollis." Wren didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She folded the corner of her page, put the book in her backpack, and stood up. "After school," she said, "before 3:15, we go up while it's still allowed, and We stay past the cut-off. That breaks Rule 6. No. Rule 6 says don't go above the second floor between 3:15 and 6 o'clock. If we're already up there before 3:15, we haven't violated the letter of the rule, only its intent. You think the distinction matters? I think the rules are precise for a reason. I think they're written like a contract. And I think there are gaps in the contract that exist because something wants them to exist. It wasn't a comforting thought, but it was a clear one. And clarity, at Harrowick, felt like the closest thing to safety I was going to get. We told Hollis at lunch. I expected resistance. I expected the flat voice, the deflection, the careful blankness he wore like a uniform. Instead, he listened, set his fork down and said, "Okay." Wren blinked. "Okay? Just okay. I know something is wrong with me. I know I lose days. I know I draw things I don't decide to draw. And I know that every time I come back from wherever I go, there's less of the part of me that minds." He looked at his hands. "I'd like to go up there while I still can." That was the most Hollis had ever said in my presence. It was also the most frightened I'd ever seen a person look while sitting perfectly still. His hands were flat on the table, fingers spread, as if he was holding himself down. 3:10, Wren said. "West stairwell. 5 minutes before the cut-off, we go up together." At 3:10 p.m, the three of us stood at the base of the west stairwell. The post-dismissal rush was thinning. A few students passed us going up. Normal traffic. Collecting things from lockers. Heading to the third floor before the cut-off. The way I'd seen on my first day. By 3:13 the flow stopped. By 3:14 we were the only ones on the stairs. We went up. The third floor hallway was physically identical to the second. Same linoleum, same lockers, same fluorescent lights, same numbered doors. Rooms 301 through 320. The lights were on. The hallway was empty. Our footsteps sounded normal. The air was at a normal temperature. 3:15 arrived. I felt it rather than heard it. A subtle shift, as if the building had closed a valve somewhere. Below us, I knew Loomis was standing at the base of the stairs. Above us, nothing changed. But the hallway now felt finished, in the way a sentence feels finished when the period drops. We were inside the sentence. It had closed around us. "Listen," Wren said. I listened. At first, nothing. Then, from behind the doors, sound. Not all at once. It faded in, like someone turning up a volume knob in slow increments. Room 301, a voice lecturing on cellular biology. Room 303, a math problem being worked through step by step. Room 305, a history lesson. Something about the founding of Harrowick. Dates I didn't recognize. Names I'd never heard. Each room had a voice. Each voice was different. And each voice was teaching with the patient, practiced cadence of someone who had been doing this for a very long time. "It's all of them," Wren whispered. "Every room." Hollis stood very still in the centre of the hallway. His head was tilted slightly, the way a dog tilts its head when it hears a frequency humans can't detect. His eyes were open but unfocused. "Hollis," I said. "I can hear the one that's mine," he said. "What do you mean? The one that's yours?" He turned and walked to room 313. He stood in front of the door. Through the narrow glass pane I could see the room beyond. Desks arranged in a grid, a whiteboard at the front. Fluorescent lights humming. Empty. Empty. But the voice inside was clear, and it was saying things I couldn't quite resolve. Not because it was quiet. Because the words seemed to slide off my comprehension, like water off a curved surface. I could hear syllables. I could hear the sentence structure, but the meaning refused to land. Hollis put his hand on the door handle. "Don't," Wren said. "Rule 3. "I'm assigned to this room," Hollis said. "I've always been assigned to this room." I looked at Wren. Her face was tight. She shook her head. Not at Hollis, at me. I don't know what to do. And this was the moment. The actual moment. Not the horror movie moment where someone reaches for the doorknob and you want to scream at the screen. The real moment, which was quieter and worse. Watching someone you care about walk towards something that has been calling them for months, and knowing that stopping them means you're choosing for them, choosing to keep them in a version of themselves that's already eroding, choosing your comfort over their agency, and knowing that letting them go means they might not come back as the person you're letting go of. I grabbed his wrist. He looked at me. His eyes were focused, completely, sharply focused, more present than I'd ever seen them. And in that presence I saw something I didn't expect, gratitude and anger in equal measure. He was glad I'd stopped him, and he hated me for it. "Not today," I said. "Not until we understand what's in there." "It's not something that's in there," Hollis said. "It's something I'm for. I'm the lesson it's teaching. It's been building me. Every time I go away, I come back more complete, more finished. And when I'm done, I go in that room and I don't come out because I don't need to. I become what it's been saying. And what is it saying? Me, it's saying me. It's reciting everything I am. My memories, my patterns, the way I hold a pen, the way I don't look at people directly, all of it. It's being spoken into that room, and when it's finished, when the lesson is complete, I walk in and He stopped. He looked at his hand on the doorknob. He looked at my hand on his wrist. He pulled free, but he stepped back. "You're right," he said. "Not today." We stayed on the 3rd floor until 4 p.m. We walked the hallway. Every room had a voice. None of them stopped. And as we walked, I noticed something Wren had noticed too, from the look on her face. The voices were on a cycle. Each room's lesson restarted approximately every 7 minutes. And in each cycle, the lesson was slightly different. Not in content, but in resolution. More detailed, more granular, as if the lesson were being refined, honed, compressed into higher fidelity with each pass. The biology lesson in 301 started with cell structure, and by the 4th cycle was describing individual protein folds. The history in 305 started with the founding dates, and by the 4th cycle was reciting the specific footprints of individual settlers on specific days. Something was teaching itself, using the rooms as classrooms and the absent students as curricula. And when a student vanished, when Hollis or anyone else dropped out of the visible school and entered the gap, they were up here, being studied, being spoken, being taught by someone who had all the patience in the world and no apparent purpose beyond completion. "This is what Harrowick is," Wren said. "The town, the school, the rules, it's all infrastructure. The rules keep the students flowing through the building in the right patterns at the right times, so this process can run. The disappearances are sampling, the long bell is maintenance, and we're all just components," I said. I was going to say students, we're all students, but we're not the ones learning. At 4:45 we went back down the west stairwell. Loomis was gone. The building was quiet. We walked out the front doors into an October evening that smelled like cold metal and dry leaves, and none of us said anything until we reached the sidewalk. So, what do we do? I asked. This was the question I'd been waiting to ask since my first day. And now that it was out loud, I realized I was not asking it rhetorically. I was asking it because I thought there might be an answer. Not a clever answer, not a twist. A real one. A thing we could actually do. Wren looked at Hollis. Hollis looked at me, and then Hollis said something that rearranged everything. We changed the lesson. He explained it on the walk home, the three of us side by side on the cracked Harrowick sidewalk, breath visible in the cold. It's teaching me, he said. It's been teaching me for months. It recites what I am, and each cycle it gets closer. But it's not done yet. It's close, but it's not done. And I know it's not done because I'm still here. I still have days I'm present. I still draw things by choice sometimes, not just the patterns it puts in me. There's still a gap between what it's saying and what I am. And you want to widen the gap, Wren said. I want to make the lesson wrong if it's building a model of me, a perfect recitation of everything I am. Then I need to stop being what it thinks I am. I need to change. Genuinely change. Do not perform a change, not pretend. Actually become different from the thing it's been compiling. How? I asked. He looked at me, and for the second time his eyes focused directly on mine. I don't know. That's why I need you, both of you, because the thing I've been, the quiet kid who draws patterns and sits alone and doesn't look at people, that's real. That's who I am. But it's also what it's been transcribing, and if I'm going to change that deeply enough to corrupt the lesson, I can't do it by myself. I need to be changed by something, by people, by being known by someone in a way it hasn't accounted for. Wren was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You're asking us to befriend you as a survival strategy." I'm asking you to befriend me because I think friendship is the one thing it can't model. It can recite my memories. It can map my patterns. But it's teaching me in isolation. Every time it samples me, it takes me alone. And when it speaks to me back, it speaks a version of me that has no one. If I have people, real ones, unpredictable ones, the model breaks. It was, I realized, the most hopeful thing I'd heard in Harrowick, and also the most uncertain, because Hollis was making a bet that whatever was teaching itself on the third floor had a limitation, a blind spot, and that the blind spot was shaped like other people, and we were betting our safety on the same theory. Over the next 3 weeks, the three of us became inseparable. Not in the way teenagers usually become friends, not through shared music or parties or late-night group chats. Through deliberate, conscious effort. We ate lunch together every day. We walked between classes together in the correct direction, always, following the rules to the letter. We studied at Wren's house. We went to Keller's diner on Saturday and ate pie and talked about nothing, about movies, about the weather, about the specific sound the furnace in Wren's basement made when it kicked on. Hollis changed, not dramatically, not in some cinematic transformation montage, in small, specific ways that I could track because I was looking. He started making eye contact. His drawings shifted. The tessellations loosened, became less geometric, more organic. He drew a tree once. Just a tree, bare branches, no pattern. He stared at it for a full minute, like he didn't recognize what his hand had made. He laughed at a joke Derek told in the cafeteria. A real laugh, sudden and unguarded. Wren and I looked at each other across the table when it happened. and I saw in her face the same fragile, terrified hope I felt in my chest. But the school was not passive. The first sign was the hallway flow. On the third Monday, the one-directional traffic pattern changed. Not officially, no announcement, no updated rule card. But the current shifted. Where before Ren and I had always been routed to different halls during midday transitions, now we kept ending up on the same corridor at the same time, as if the building were concentrating us, putting us together. "That's not a good sign," Ren said. "It separates people. That's its default. If it's pushing us together, it wants to see what we're building." "Or it wants to learn it," I said. "Same thing." The second sign was Hollis's absences. He'd been present for 3 straight weeks, the longest stretch since I'd arrived. Then, on a Thursday, his seat was empty. Ren and I said nothing. We followed the rule. We waited. He came back on Friday. This time he remembered being gone. "It was the hallway," he said quietly at lunch. "The third-floor hallway. I was there. I could hear room 313. The lesson was... It was almost right. Almost me, but there were gaps in it. New gaps. Things it couldn't fill." "What kinds of gaps?" "The diner, Saturday, the pie. It didn't have that. It was trying to recite the pattern of the last 3 weeks, and there were holes where you two had been. Not silence, holes. Like a sentence with the nouns removed." Ren gripped the edge of the table. "It's working." "It's working now," Hollis said. "But it's adaptive. It'll try to learn the new data. It'll try to sample me again. And this time it'll look for the parts it's missing. And if it finds them..." "It teaches us too," I finished. Hollis nodded. So we had a window. The friendship was corrupting the lesson, but the corruption was temporary. The system would adapt. It would expand its sampling. It would try to capture not just Hollis, but the connections around him. And that meant Ren and me were no longer observers. We were variables that it would eventually try to incorporate. We had, at most, a few weeks before the model caught up. Here's what we did. I'm telling you this not because it was heroic or clever, but because it was the best we had. And we did it knowing it might not be enough. We talked to people, not about the rules, not about the third floor, not about the long bell or the disappearances or the voices behind the doors. We talked to other students, as many as we could, about Hollis. We said his name. We said it constantly. In the hallway, in the cafeteria, on the sidewalk. Hollis Pratt. "Have you met Hollis? You should sit with Hollis at lunch. Hollis, tell Derek about the tree you drew." We made him visible. Specifically, deliberately, relationally visible. Not as a pattern, not as a data set, but as a person known to other people. We introduced him, we included him, we wove him into the social fabric of the school so densely that isolating him, sampling him alone, would mean tearing a hole that dozens of students would notice. And they did notice. That was the unexpected part. When we pulled Hollis into conversation, something loosened in the people around him. Not because of anything supernatural, because of the basic human fact that when someone invisible suddenly becomes visible, the people who couldn't see them before feel a small shock of recognition. How did I miss this person? And that shock, that tiny crack in the automatic, makes them, for a moment, conscious. Kids started talking to Hollis, sitting with him, asking about his drawings, and each connection was another hole the lesson couldn't fill, another noun it couldn't remove. Ren and I couldn't stop the school from being what it was. We couldn't tear up the rules or close the classrooms or silenced the voices on the third floor. The system was older than us, deeper than us, built into the architecture and the culture, and probably the ground the building stood on. But we could make one person too complicated to finish, too known, too held by too many people for the model to complete. On the first Tuesday of November, I was walking home alone. Wren had basketball practice. Hollis had left early. A dentist appointment, real and verifiable. His mother had called the office. I was 2 blocks from the school when I heard the long bell. I stopped. I was outside. The rule said nearest interior room. I was not in a room. I was on a sidewalk in the open air. The bell held, that sustained, living tone resonating from the building on the hill. And I realized, standing there on the cracked pavement of Harrowwick's main street, that I had never considered what the long bell meant for someone outside the school. The rules were written for the interior. They assumed containment. What happened when the bell rang, and you were already free? I stood very still. The air around me did not change. No displacement, no heaviness, no sense of presence. The bell held for 90 seconds and stopped. The evening resumed. A car drove past. A dog barked. Nothing happened to me. And I understood with a clarity that felt like stepping out of water that the thing in the school could not reach past its walls. The rules were not natural law. They were architecture. They applied inside the building because the building was the mechanism. Outside it, the bell was just a sound. I ran to Wren's house. I told her. She sat on her porch and stared at me. "You sure?" Nothing happened. Nothing. It rang. I stood there. It stopped. Then the building is the boundary. The building is the boundary. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had changed in her face. Not relief. Something sharper. The look of someone who has been swimming against a current for 4 years and just touched the bottom. "Then we get Hollis out," she said. "Not just socially, physically. If the sampling only happens inside the building and the lesson can only run inside those rooms, then we keep him out. We make the school optional. He has to go to school. There are laws. There are other schools, there are homeschool programs, there are online options. His parents just have to agree. His parents went to Harrowwick. His parents love him." She said it simply, and she was right. I'd met Hollis's mother once. A small, nervous woman who hovered in the doorway when we came to pick him up, who watched him leave with us like she was watching something she'd been praying for. She didn't know the details, but she knew her son had been disappearing in some way she couldn't name, and she knew he'd been coming back more present since October. We told Hollis the next day. He listened. He was quiet for a long time. We were sitting on the front steps of the school, and the building was behind us, and I could feel it the way you feel weather. A pressure, a system, a thing with its own logic that doesn't care about yours. "If I leave," he said, "it loses one student, but it doesn't stop. The rooms keep teaching, the bell keeps ringing. Other students will vanish and come back less than they were. You can't save everyone." "We're not trying to save everyone," Wren said. "We're trying to save you." "And what about the next me? The next quiet kid who draws patterns and doesn't look at people? The next one starts reciting?" I looked at Wren. She looked at me. And I said something I meant more than anything I'd said since arriving in Harrowwick. "Then we'll be here, and we'll do what we did for you, because that's the only thing that worked. Not understanding the system, not documenting it, not cracking the rules. Just refusing to let it have someone alone. Hollis looked at the sky. It was grey and close, the way November skies are in valley towns. When he looked back at us, his eyes were wet, and he was smiling, and the smile was his. Completely, entirely, irreducibly his. "Okay," he said. "I'll go." Hollis Pratt withdrew from Harrowick Regional Secondary on November 14th. His mother enrolled him in an online program through the state. He still lived in town. He still came to Keller's on Saturdays. He still drew, but the tessellations were gone. He was into botanical illustration now, careful studies of the trees along the river. Room 313 went silent. Wren and I checked once, at 3:12 p.m. on a Friday. Early enough to be legal. We stood outside the door and listened. Nothing. Not silence. The room was just a room. Empty desks, a whiteboard, fluorescent lights. Whatever lesson had been running in there had stopped. Not because we'd defeated it, because the student who was learning was no longer available. The recitation couldn't be completed. The model had too many holes, and without new data, it had nothing to teach itself. The other rooms were still running. The long bell still rang every few weeks, and when it did, I still ducked into the nearest interior room and sat facing the door. The rules still applied. The system still operated. We hadn't broken it. We hadn't even damaged it. But we'd gotten one person out. I'm telling you this from our kitchen table. It's March now. The snow is melting and the river is high, and I can see the school on the hill from my bedroom window. The lights on the third floor come on at 3:15 every day and stay on until 6. I don't know what's happening up there. I don't know how many rooms are running lessons or how many students are being taught. I don't know if the system is adapting, finding new ways to sample, adjusting for the interference Wren and I represent. But I know this. Hollis called me an hour ago. He wanted to know if I'd seen the red-tailed hawk that's been perched on the telephone pole outside his house. He described it to me, the banding on its tail feathers, the way it turned its head. He described it the way someone describes something they chose to look at, something that caught their attention because they were paying attention, because they were present, unscripted, and free. Wren and I go back to that school every morning. We walk in the front door and turn right. We follow the one-directional flow. We carry our rule cards. We never say the names of absent students during class. And when the long bell rings, we sit facing the door. But we also sit with the quiet kids, the ones who draw in the margins, the ones who don't make eye contact, the ones the building is studying. We can't stop the school from being what it is. We can't tear up the rules, silence the rooms, or keep the bell from ringing. But we can make it harder for people to finish. We can be the holes in the lesson, the nouns that can't be removed, the connections that make a person too known, too held, too present to be spoken into an empty room by something that has never understood what it was trying to say. That's not a victory, I know that. The school is still there, the rules still run, and somewhere on the third floor, behind a door I will never open, a voice is teaching itself the shape of someone I haven't met yet. But I'll meet them. Wren will meet them. And when we do, we'll do the only thing that ever worked. We'll make sure they're not alone. I can still hear the hum at night, from the hill, from the building, that low, arrhythmic breathing. But now, when I hear it, I think you can learn everything about a person, every memory, every pattern, every habit, preference and fear. But you can't learn what it feels like to be known by someone who chose you. And until you can, your lessons will never be complete. The card is still in my pocket. 6 rules, I follow all of them. But I question everyone.